Welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I am your guest host, subbing in for Leon Wolf this week, Aaron Gardner. With us, as always, we have the regular panel. We have Scott Lincicome from the Cato Institute. We have Neal from the Federalist. We have Jeff Blehar from Spade's Decision Desk. And we also have Bill McMorris from Washington Free Beacon. This week we also have a special guest with us. We have Charles Cooke from National Review Online. Thank you, Charles, for joining us this evening. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. We're going to discuss a few different topics this evening. And the first one is we're going to jump into the entire POTUS field for 2016, both on the Democrat side and on the Republican side. We got a lot of news that's been coming out recently. Let's just go ahead and jump in and start with Hillary Clinton, the biggest of them all, so to speak, on the left side of the spectrum. We have the newest news coming out that not only do we have all the Clinton cache, the Clinton email servers, and everything else that's been reported on for months now, we also see now that we have a judge coming out, putting out an injunction basically saying that they're going to have to release emails every 30 days. We have Sidney Blumenthal being reported that he was getting a $10,000 a month salary, when this is the one guy that the Obama administration said, look, we really don't want you having any contact with this guy. So I guess let's go ahead and go to you first, Charles, and stick with the tradition of asking our new guests to comment first. Let me ask you. We've all heard about Clinton scandals for years and years and years, and there's become this cynicism around anything that the Clintons do, as to them never getting caught, them never being held accountable. Do you think this is going to remain true for the Hillary Clinton campaign going into 2016 with everything that we're seeing, considering we live in a different era of news media consumption? Do you believe that Hillary Clinton can be as Teflon as Bill Clinton was during his time?
Pretty much, yeah. I think it is possible that she would have to kill somebody on live television before she would start to see her voters disappear. The only hope I have is that there are enough people in the middle who could be seduced by a strong Republican candidate who will think the latent impression they have of her as a dishonest person, that does seem to be a real thing, is important. Up to the moment, I don't think it's really hurting her that much.
Well, I agree. Up to the moment, I don't think it's hurting her that much either. And I think one of the reasons why is obviously we have a pretty thin field on the Democrat side, and the way they work their process, she's kind of next in line and has been guaranteed that spot. Now, that brings up a point. We have Bernie Sanders on the left edge of Hillary Clinton. I don't necessarily want to jump into Bernie Sanders stuff just yet, but let me go around the table and ask for a couple other opinions. Neal, I want to go to you, and since I see you're trying to light up, I want to save your lungs for a moment and ask you, what are your feelings? Do you think Hillary Clinton has the same ability as Bill Clinton to just let these scandals slide off of her, especially in an age where digital documents exist and they're quite easily found by opposition researchers?
Hillary doesn't possess nearly the same raw political talent that her husband does, but she doesn't need the ability. She will just have a lot of people covering for her in the media. I think it's admirable that the Clinton Foundation news is being reported, so very consistently and thoroughly and all that. I do, however, think it's mostly a function of getting it out of the way early so that they can call it old news when the time comes around, when people are actually paying attention.
Now, let me ask you on that. How is it that they can go through that process, which they always do, saying, "Hey, this is old news. We've been through this, blah blah blah." How are they going to be able to actually achieve that if there's a rolling news dump every 30 days of more emails where everybody's going to get involved and scour them and look for connections and see whether or not there's any classified information that may have been passed or any indication that there was? How does she actually achieve that and say it's old news when it's going to continually be refreshed?
by relying on the American voters' attention span, I should think. If our side really wanted to, go for maximum effect here, maybe what they do is instead of reporting any of this stuff, they just let the sources come out, sit.
And as usual, we have our first freeze up, and it's Neal doing with his impeccable timing and Wi-Fi. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bounce over to Jeff real quick and have.
It was a great idea. Sorry, Google, you ruined it.
Neal, you want to finish your thought there, just to get your last word in?
Nah, go for it.
Fuck it, go with it. All right, let's do it.
So Jeff, I want to get you on record as well. Do you think Hillary has the ability to be Slick Willie?
She has the ability to not suffer any serious challenge to her nomination as Democratic candidate for president, if that's what you're asking. But she's not Slick Willie, and we all know this, in the sense that she has none of the personal warmth and political capacities that Bill Clinton has, and she never has. She is a... Okay, one of these things that I learned in college, a friend taught me in college, is that, if you have to shake hands with someone who you don't like, what you do is you don't just shake hands with them normally, you give them what is known as the fish. The fish is this. You hold your hand like that, and you make them grab it like that. And that's the worst feeling in the world. And then you wriggle your fingers, and it feels like you're holding onto a fish. Hillary Clinton is the human political equivalent of the fish. You listen to her speak, and she leaves you cold and dead and empty inside. Partisan alignment is enough that she will get to, at a bare minimum, 46% of the vote. And that's just a fact of life. But she is not Bill Clinton. She is not going to... People say that, oh, now that Hillary is running... There was a good political article on this recently that, Democrats are trying to talk people into running on down-ballot races by saying, oh, Hillary's going to be running in 2016, presidential turnout, Hillary's a juggernaut. In places where the Democrats haven't had much luck lately, you should get into the race, you have a chance of winning. I don't buy it for a second. I don't think she's going to do any better than Barack Obama has done in places like West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Western Pennsylvania, even upstate or downstate Illinois or upstate Michigan. I just do not think that those people are coming back to the Democratic Party merely because Obama is no longer on the ticket, precisely because Hillary has nothing whatsoever about her that is inspiring other than perhaps her demography, which is something that cannot be underestimated. The fact that she's a woman, it matters. We dismiss it at our peril. But no, she is not Bill Clinton, who was a once-in-a-generation talent politically.
I think you make a good point about her being a woman, and a little bit about the inevitability of a Clinton. I have a friend who's apolitical, doesn't really follow it, a churchgoer. She's an evangelical churchgoer, and when she talked to my wife about it, she immediately thought Hillary Clinton was obviously the choice for president. So I can understand where you're coming from with that.
Real. It's a real thing.
It is a real thing, and it needs to be addressed. Yeah, we can't deny Hillary is a woman. That much is true.
The minute she has to get out there and speak in a debate or a speech and represent herself, a lot of those initial, oh, she's a woman, first woman president, that's a good thing, that will fall away. Certainly not for all females. But
right, and I think that goes.
Are going to look at her and say, "Oh, she's gross," and they're going to fall off.
I think that goes towards a larger aspect of Clinton, and that's the believability and the she's not real. She's not a real person, and the whole Clinton Foundation escapades kind of show that as well. And I want to get into that a little bit more. There was news that came out today that Sidney Blumenthal was getting paid $10,000 a month to basically do consulting for the Clinton Foundation after people had basically complained about him working there before. And when Hillary Clinton was working at the State Department, he was basically doing clandestine intelligence operations and passing stuff to her. And this is one person who the Obama administration kind of insisted that there'd be some distance between the State Department, Hillary Clinton, and Sidney Blumenthal. And I want to get into this a little bit. So let me come over to Scott real quick and ask him about this. What do you think about the Sidney Blumenthal deal with Hillary Clinton, and what impact will that specifically have on not only her ability to win in a general election or be seen as likable or whatever in a general election, but what's it do in the primary field where you have people like large factions of Obama supporters who she's going to need, who she may have pissed off a little bit with things like this?
Well, okay. First, I mean, Sidney's got to feed his family, right? So, you can't blame the guy for the sweet gig he worked for himself. But no, I mean, more seriously, to kind of reiterate some of the things I already said, I think that sometimes we need to step back away from our political obsessive lives and from the Twitter sphere, and think about what the average American voter really is doing right now, and that is they are not paying attention to Sidney Blumenthal. And I think that, I would love to see another one of those man on the street videos where people, ask whom they're going to vote for and what they think of Hillary Clinton. So I bet you very, very good money that the sentiments haven't changed in the least, that most of these news is just not penetrating. So, I think that until we really get into a full-blown scandal, or until there is something that comes up, almost a year from now, all of this is kind of superfluous.
Well, let me also let's shift a little bit in the Democratic field to Senator Bernie Sanders, who announced his run by basically coming out against choice in the marketplace of deodorants. And then today we saw a newspaper clipping that about how he talks about men and women back in the 1970s, and he talks about some interesting things about rape fantasies for men and women, and how this seems to be some normal struggle that was going on for women back in the day for feminism rights. Scott, do you have any comment on Bernie Sanders and what how these rape fantasies might affect his chances in the field?
Well, I mean, he never had any chances, but look. If that's how he wants to roll on the commune, then whom am I to judge? That's really,
what happens on the commune stays on the
commune.
Stays
on the commune. That's my view. But really, look, Bernie's kind of a sideshow. He's pretty funny. I wish he was going to get more publicity, because I think some of his crackpot economic views are downright hilarious. And deserving of more ridicule and attention. But the reality is, look, Bernie is not really much of a threat, despite the fever dreams of some of the left-wing media. He is not going to be a challenge. He is not going to seriously push the debate. I think he'll have a few golden moments, and that'll basically be it. But I mean, I do have to say, his literary interests are as eccentric as his economics. I'll put it that way.
Yes, I would say they are. Now, I know there was a little bit of a scuffle on Twitter earlier today about this Bernie Sanders thing, and Charles, I believe you got into it a little bit, or you were tangentially hit in the scuffle. Now, what do you think of this little written piece in a little newspaper in Vermont in the 1970s regarding rape fantasies of men and women? Specifically, what troubles me is this idea that he put forth that when a woman lays down with her husband and begins to make love, what she's really thinking about is three men raping her simultaneously. That seems to say a lot more about Bernie Sanders than it really says about feminism or rape culture or the culture of the 70s to me. But what's your opinion on this?
No, I agree with that. It was a bizarre piece. I certainly wasn't endorsing it. What I do think is that Bernie Sanders is an odd man from the People's Republic of Burlington who probably went with every crackpot psychological theory going in the 1970s. And to hold words that he wrote 43 years ago and God knows what state to against him now, I think is probably a little bit unreasonable. I'd much rather, as Scott suggested, I'd much rather hold his economics against him. Economics that he is endorsing right now. I mean, look, this is a guy who has voted with Hillary Clinton 93% of the time. They're actually not that different, at least in the way they've voted. The ACU rating for Bernie Sanders is 6. The ACU rating for Hillary Clinton is 8. Now, I would like people to know that she's not, at least in electoral terms, too much different from the guy who wants to return to a 90% tax rate in a global economy, from the guy who thinks that the reason that children are hungry is that we have too many different sneakers available on the market. Yeah, around the edges, if people want to hit him, all is fair in love and war and politics. For things he wrote 43 years ago, so be it. But as a writer, I'm far more interested in the fact that he's a complete lunatic. Whenever his ideas have been tried, countries have collapsed, and I don't think it's unfair to say, if not descended into tyranny.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think his strange ideas about sexuality definitely are a reflection of his strange ideas on economics. And now, but let me ask, isn't there a value though this early in the primary season to exposing the hypocrisy around this, as Asho has done on Twitter, calling out people like what was it, Claire McCaskill, who was absolutely clutching pearls because of a rape scene in Game of Thrones and wanting to censor Game of Thrones because of a rape scene. Isn't there a value to calling out this hypocrisy where they're all kind of circling the wagons around Bernie Sanders and saying, oh, it was just satire, he didn't mean it, when we all know that if Mitt Romney in high school had written that he thought about touching a woman even appropriately, it would have been a huge scandal and a show of how hypocritical the family values, social values people are.
I actually think that would have helped Mitt Romney. People would have been like, oh, that guy has a personality.
That could be a valid point, but let me go to Charles real quick for his response.
I was just going to say, I'm all for exposing hypocrisy, and I wrote up a little presumption as to what it would have been like if Rick Santorum had said this or Ted Cruz had said this. We should be hammering the media on this. There's no problem with that. What I don't think we should do is to encourage the sort of mob-based rage spirals that you see on the left, where suddenly he becomes Bernie the rapist and he has to commit suicide on national television. My objection was to pretending that Bernie Sanders is some sort of hideous misogynist. Of course we should be pointing out that the media jump on one side and not the other. I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if this had been Mitt Romney?
Well, and let me just add real quick. I think that conservatives and Republicans in general have a vested interest in keeping Bernie around as long as possible. Certainly you don't want to knock him out over this. Have him be in, have him keep saying lunacy about Axe body spray, have him keep pushing Hillary to the left. Don't knock him out because of some wacky, ridiculous thing he wrote in the 1970s, as weird as it is. Keep him around, keep him in the debates, and as Charles said, tie him to Hillary's policy views, because the guy's an avowed socialist, and his views are ridiculous, and those views should be laced up and attached to Hillary Clinton.
But does Bernie Sanders really, draw Hillary to the left? Doesn't he just make her look more sensible and credible? And doesn't he actually give her an opportunity, if she listens to her husband's political instincts, to triangulate and sort of stake out an acceptable position for Democrats?
But does Hillary triangulate? Everybody keeps saying this, but I haven't really seen Hillary in the past. Hillary tends to tack wherever the wind pushes her. So I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be the case. I mean, I keep hearing these theories that Bernie's in the race solely to make Hillary look sane and acceptable, but I just don't know if that's her shtick. That's Bill's shtick. I'm not sure it's hers.
You know, let me jump in here. I think Bernie's in the race to make Warren look like an acceptable option to Clinton. But let me actually go back to one thing. I wanted to make this point earlier. And Charles is right. We do need to focus on the economic policies that Bernie Sanders is pushing. I mean, this is a guy who comes from a town that actually considered putting an entire dome around the city to have it like be this ecosystem all of its own, not realizing that it would have killed them all eventually. But this is also a guy who comes out and is against, says there's too much choice in deodorant when he's announcing his run for the presidency, and he's pushing socialism basically. And meanwhile, The Hill is reporting that the overhead is killing Obamacare. So we have real world examples of Bernie Sanders' policies, and his are even more extreme than what we have implemented. But basically, we have his policies implemented in the sense of Obamacare, and it's strangling our economy right now. If Obamacare weren't in place, we'd be in a much better position as an economy. So I want to ask, how do we tie that to him? How do we tie that to his policies in a consistent way? Bill, let me bring you in here. We haven't had you on at all, so.
Yeah, well, it's in my contract that I can't come on until I have 2 beers. So now that we're past that threshold, I also my internet froze up, so I had to restart. So I have no idea what you asked me. But let me jump in. I'm assuming we're still on Bernie Sanders, right? Just nod your head twice. Sweet. Okay, so still on Bernie Sanders. I'm assuming we're talking, we've moved on from his sexual fantasies, and we're talking about, what, deodorant? I think he's spot on about deodorant, man. We need less Axe body spray in the entirety of, the CVS. There's just too much. We smell too ridiculous and too diffuse. I just want to go back to the days of, Speed Stick.
Well,
you want to re-ask your question?
Speed Stick is acceptable. Speed Stick is acceptable. I'm personally checking the FEC records to see if Bernie Sanders has gotten any big donations from Tom's of Maine. It's an organic, all-natural deodorant.
That could be it.
All the hippies use up there, along with patchouli oil. But what I was actually asking about, we have a socialist candidate, an independent socialist candidate, and we have a socialist healthcare system that's been implemented to an extent, and we're getting reports from The Hill that say that the overhead is absolutely killing Obamacare. How do we tie this to people like Hillary and Sanders? That was my question to you.
Oh, well, it's very easy to tie it to Sanders. He, of course, voted for the thing. For Hillary, it's, you just make the argument, you try to marry her to Obama. And I think you tie Obamacare to Hillary the same way you tie the fact that the world is on fire to Hillary, the fact that you were there, you were in the room, you had influence, and you've done nothing. And I think that we can actually make the argument and try to do to Hillary what Obama so successfully did to McCain, which is just say, you're President 3.0. You're the third term of Obama. And I mean that in the pejorative sense. I don't think Obama enjoys the, kind of the patience with the American voter that he did, say, back in 2012. So I think it will be very easy to tie them to the legacy that we're seeing right now with Obamacare. So that's, I guess that's my 2 cents. I think the Republican Party is fully prepared to do this, and they're, going to go guns blazing anytime they even try to tout the success of Obamacare.
Well, I think we're definitely in a good situation as far as the GOP goes. We have a bunch of candidates out there, a much more diverse crowd than the Democrat field right now, and I think the Democrats have a lot of anchors around their necks right now. So with that, I want to kind of close out the subject on the Democratic field and move over to the GOP field a little bit. We have this recent Quinnipiac poll that came out that kind of shows a couple front runners, a couple mid-trackers, and a couple people falling a little bit behind. My personal opinion on the polls this early is that they don't really mean a whole lot. But I do want to talk more about the media mentions that we're seeing. And one of the media mentions that I want to start off with is one of the underdog candidates. And she's actually doing some really good things as a candidate. and that's Carly Fiorina. Now, she's basically entered this race. She has a record as an HBC CEO that a lot of people know about. And she also has a background working with the intelligence agencies to a small degree after 9/11. And she also ran for Senate in California. Pardon me. So one of the things that she has been doing is she has been showing up to Clinton events and staging a press conference outside of these events. So is Carly Fiorina the Republican or GOP candidate who has been decided to be the troll of Hillary Clinton? Is that what her role is in this primary? Is that what she's going to be defined as? I want to start with you on this, Jeff. So tell me, is that what she's going to be defined as Hillary Clinton's troll?
Yeah, that's basically what she's going to be defined as. And I don't necessarily think that that's a poor thing to aspire to in life. Listen, we all understand that Carly Fiorina, for a number of reasons, not the least which is that she's never held elective office, is never going to be a serious presidential candidate. The last time, I believe, that either party nominated someone who had no prior elected experience to the presidency was actually the Republican Party in 1940 with Wendell Willkie. And I think you guys all know how well that went for the Republicans.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think FDR won like 45 out of 50 states. It was nearly Reagan-esque. But the point is that we know she's not going to win the candidacy. But every one of us, I think, when we watch her out there, I was talking with, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Seth Mandel, formerly of Commentary, and now he's with the New York Post, who said that she's putting on a clinic. I mean, a real basketball clinic level way of how to handle questions, how to do the campaigning. She is a really solid campaigner. And you said Hillary Clinton troll. I think I could dignify it with a little better language. I'd call her a surrogate. She will end up the best and or most effective surrogate that we can mount, especially to speak to women about why Hillary is, functionally speaking, garbage. And in any future Republican administration, she's a no-brainer for like a Secretary of Commerce or they want a cabinet position of some sort or another.
I thought you were just gonna say secretary. I got really excited.
Yes. Secretary, like Mad Men style secretary, right? Like really sexist 50s, 60s type. No, seriously, she is exactly the sort of person who you see her rising in the polls and making that 10-man cutoff that the Fox News debates have, and you cheer for it because you want her on that stage. You want her on that stage because you know that she's got nothing to lose. Her business career is over. She's sitting on her laurels. She just wants to hit out against Hillary, and you want to see her do it, and you want to have her on that stage so that she can do it. And I actually do think that if she makes it to the debates, that her stock will rise in the same way that Newt Gingrich's stock rose and Herman Cain's stock rose in 2012, even though they were never going to be the nominee.
Jeff. Thing that we had people like Herman Cain, his stock rising in 2012. Are you saying that it's a good thing to have 10 candidates on the stage at all when we should have no more than 5 or 7 at the most? Carly Fiorina is irrelevant, and we're hoping like hell that she'll be useful in this campaign. But I think that at a certain point, you just have to face facts and not give her any more attention than she deserves.
You want me to tell you why? Because I have more confidence in her than I ever would have had in Herman Cain. Carly Fiorina plays ball. She plays ball. She's a team player, and I actually don't think she'll fuck things up. Pardon my language.
But let me differ with you further. This year we have a lot fewer clowns on stage as well in the mix. We have a lot deeper bench than we did in 12. So maybe in 12 she would have been quite formidable and quite the whatever alternative. But this year, no, she's not. She's an afterthought and also ran. She could be a useful surrogate if we keep on telling ourselves and I think trying to tell her and her people with every press story that's filed saying surrogate that she could perform that role. But I don't see any reason to laud her beyond where she is.
She's
Let me-
running for vice president.
Yeah, well, I think Charles has a point there.
I think
And
yes,
let me-
I agree. I think that would be a good idea, actually.
That's
Yeah.
why she's doing it. She's not politically experienced. She doesn't have a built-in base. She wants to prove herself. So she puts herself up as the only woman in the race. She'll get a little more attention than some of the other fringe candidates just because of that. She then makes herself attractive for whichever of the current men, let's be honest, who finally wins the nomination. And then she demonstrates that she can troll Hillary Clinton effectively, counter perhaps some of that first woman offer, and possibly become president later on in her life if her ticket wins. I'm not suggesting that it will. She's got an obvious game plan. She's probably the worst kept secret in Washington. She wants to be the VP.
I think you make a very good point there. She has been traveling around the nation to a lot of different places that I haven't even seen any presidential prospects actually go to. She's doing it in a way that she's broadening her base, and I don't think she's going to be able to do it to the extent that a presidential candidate would have to. I think she's raising her name recognition in the GOP circles for that VP slot. And I think she's doing it well. I got the chance to go to a Lincoln Day dinner here in El Paso County, Colorado, which is one of the most conservative counties in the United States. And she was the keynote speaker, and she did an excellent job. And I was sitting at a table with more women than men. In fact, I was one of two men at the table, and every single woman at that table stopped what they were doing, turned their chairs around if they needed to, and watched Carly speak, and they all praised her at the end of it. They all felt like that she was a woman who displayed an intellectual depth and an ability to speak on the issues and not come off as just a woman in politics, but a smart person who understands what's going on. So I think that was definitely to her benefit. I want to go ahead and move on from Carly a little bit here into this. There's already some feuding going on in the GOP field between the traditional conservative and more libertarian foreign policy aspects that are being kicked around. We've seen it with some jabs between Paul and Rubio and others, but most predominantly we saw this with Bobby Jindal coming after Rand Paul, on foreign policy. First person who I obviously want to go to on this is our resident libertarian on the panel, and that would be Scott. What do you think about the way in which Jindal went after Paul on foreign policy?
Well, I like Bobby Jindal, and I'm certainly not a hardcore libertarian foreign policy supporter. But the whole thing struck me as a bit desperate by Jindal, that in an attempt to gain relevance, he's kind of going after one of the obvious weak spots for Paul and kind of one of the some of the low-hanging fruit for part of the GOP that he's seeking to court. However, I think that everyone that you mentioned seems to be acting like a child, whether it be on Twitter or in these responses. I don't think the Twitter foreign policy debate between our GOP candidates is going all that well, quite honestly. It seems rather petty. I mean, it's a race to determine who started ISIS. Is that what we're doing? It's pretty lame. And that's considering ISIS is arguably going to be the, or if not one of the big foreign policy issues for 2016 and beyond. It's kind of sad that this is becoming a punchline. So overall, I kind of find it all distasteful. Although I've discovered now that Neal Dewing has admitted here in the chat room that he actually started ISIS, which makes some sense, actually.
It really does.
I may have started it. There have been several dark periods in my life lately, including several blackouts. So I can't really be responsible for what I may or may not have done, what destructive civilization-destroying forces I may have unleashed.
Neal, you are Shiva, destroyer of worlds. I think we've all known this for a while.
He does bring swords onto the show all the time. He's always handling a sword.
I don't bring them. They're just here.
Looks like Jihad Johnny, you know?
I'm just saying, Neal, you know who else wore a half Windsor, right? ISIS. That's who.
Well, that's why I'm wearing a four-in-hand tonight. Anyway,
yeah, it's a terrible knot.
It is a terrible knot, but I'm trying to, be casual here. At any rate, the thing about ISIS is, I'm frozen.
Neal got interrupted. I just want to ask Neal, is Neal sitting in the pantry right now of his house?
Way to steal my joke from the chat. That's ridiculous.
I'm ashamed of
blatant plagiarism.
Sorry,
McMorris. Zachariah.
It's blatant plagiarism. But let me. Okay.
Anyway,
Neal is back. Let me give Neal his thing.
I got better reception in Tora Bora. Okay, this is ridiculous. Yeah. Okay. So the thing about ISIS is, I've changed my mind. I regret starting it. I would prefer that ISIS be completely eradicated from the face of the earth immediately, as soon as possible. Boots on the ground, nuclear weapons, whatever it takes to kill every single one of those assholes with the quickness.
At this point, what difference does it make?
We're gonna kill them with quickness.
Kill them with quickness. So. I'm a veteran. I don't know if anybody else on the panel is a veteran, but my personal perspective on Iraq is that every single one of the candidates has failed to answer this question correctly. But Rick Perry came the closest by turning it around on the Democrats and specifically Clinton and Obama, asking if you knew now, or if you knew then what you know now, would you have pulled out of Iraq in 2011? That's the real question, because if you really want to talk about who created ISIS and what we should be doing about foreign policy to stop them, you really got to lay a lot of blame at the feet of the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton's State Department. Now, I want to go to Charles and get him back into the conversation. He's been kind of quiet here on this. So what do you think about the feud between Paul and every other candidate when it comes to foreign policy, basically? We have Paul saying that Bush is no neocon. We have Bush going negative early on multiple candidates. And then we have Jindal coming after Rand Paul for his foreign policy. What do you think about this division within the party?
I think two things have happened. I think the reason that Bobby Jindal is playing this role is because he needs to break out of his position. This is always the risk when you have so many fringe candidates, is they're going to make a show of themselves in order to get above their 1, 2, 3, 4% threshold. Rand Paul did bring some of this on himself, though, and he's performed a sort of inverse triangulation process. He started off by critiquing the Republican Party on foreign policy, which is fine, and therefore alienating those people who consider themselves to be hawks. But then he came out and said, well, we should be fighting ISIS and we should increase defense spending, and thoroughly confusing people, at which point those who were supporting him from the more libertarian or non-interventionist side said, well, to hell with you, and the hawks, who had already written him off, said, well, we're not having you back. If you wanted somebody who wants to increase defense spending and start fights around the world, you could easily vote for a Marco Rubio. So I'm not quite sure what his policy has been, but he has opened himself up to the charge of flip-flopper or of a vague policy, and it's no surprise that those candidates that aren't getting traction have taken him to task for it.
It isn't a surprise that you see other candidates in the field taking in to task for his foreign policy, and I guess I don't know how long this is going to be able to go on for Paul, because honestly, I think with ISIS and the feelings that a lot of people are showing now, even there's been the Harvard poll that showed that millennials actually feel that in support of boots on the ground to take out ISIS. How long can this libertarian moment on foreign policy actually last? Scott, what's your opinion on that?
I think aspects of it can last a while. I think that the pretty severe non-interventionism that was seeming to become pretty prevalent, right around 2012, 2013-ish, is certainly retreating given the absolute cluster that is ISIS and Syria and the rest. However, I do see some glimmers of hope for at least a little more sanity on the fiscal side of things. There does seem to be a pretty pronounced movement in the GOP. Not everyone, not everywhere, but there does seem to be more of a discussion of kind of some of the boondoggles out there, like the F-35, and some of the kind of blind commitment to defense spending, some of the ridiculous Keynesian statements from our politicians about supporting defense jobs and the rest of this that seem to, used to be rather prevalent in the GOP, and I think still are, but there does seem to be a bit more of a thread of that libertarianism. So, I think you might see a bit of a hybrid where a bit more skepticism about blank check spending, but certainly not any sort of Rand Paul-esque non-interventionism in the Middle East and elsewhere, just given the absolute debacle that it is over there right now.
I think Scott's actually making alluding to a great point, and it's something we should point out, is that we've actually been trying this non-interventionist, hands-off approach to foreign policy over the past few years, trying to reset with Russia, making the case that, it's up to Iraq to, by themselves, to defend everything. And I feel like there was a lot of sympathy for that. Hey, why aren't the Iraqis defending themselves? But when it comes down to it, and ISIS is such a civilizational threat to the entire West, I think that it's woken people up to the idea that, we're not going to be able to just sit this one out and hope for the best. And I think that's actually been.
Well, and I think that you have a point, Bill, in a bit, but I think it's a little unfair also that the non-interventionist approach to the Middle East really never stood a chance given all of the intervention that had been going on there for a decade or more throughout the Bush administration and even in the Obama administration. And let's face it, these guys, Obama is not a non-interventionist. It's insane.
Well, I think there's a difference. If we're talking about the scope of intervention, we tried the minimalistic drone-first approach. We tried the aircraft-only approach in Libya, and that's obviously proved a disastrous failure. So I guess the libertarians can either dig in and say, well, if we weren't drone striking to begin with, that should be the approach. And I think that, that's the type of case that Bernie Sanders is going to make. I don't see anyone in the GOP field actually going forward with that. So I don't know. It's kind of like deploying Dylan G when you have Matt Harvey at your disposal. You should really just go all in, is really the point I'm trying to make here.
The point I would make is that I think a proper approach to drone strikes is to no longer have these mechanized creations dropping missiles upon foreign terrorists from afar, is that they should simply launch Max Scherzer of the Nationals into space and have him lob fastballs at terrorists. And
lob fastballs.
He can lob fastballs at them and just beam them in the head with no worries about being thrown out of a game for headhunting, because Obama loves to headhunt, and there's just not a problem with that.
No, your plan is bogus because there's a thing called maximum velocity when you're falling through. So it doesn't matter that you're throwing 99 miles an hour. When you let go of the thing, it's gonna hit terminal velocity.
Yes,
and
but here's the difference.
It could
Max
being
Bill.
thrown from
The
space.
fact of the matter is that Max Scherzer has better control than Matt Harvey. He can make sure that it hits the target.
False.
In a way that Matt Harvey
He's a power pitcher with less control. No, it's ridiculous.
You're practically a creationist.
I believe I've let this go.
No, I'm definitely a creationist.
Let me just say, I want to close out on this topic. We kind of went all in to talk about foreign policy in the GOP field, and really didn't discuss a whole lot of other significant stuff. But my position on this, and I think the GOP and Americans at large need to grow up about what war is and realize that the threat that we face is big. And it's not going away. And you have to be committed to fight it all the way to the end. You have to be committed to go over there and really, if you're going to do it, you got to go over there and you got to reorganize and restructure their entire world, just as was done in Europe after World War II. And it's going to take a commitment that I don't think that the American people no, I don't think they have anymore in their character. So I don't think.
So
it's
you're
something
making
that's
the
gonna
go
be
big or go home approach to foreign policy?
Yes, absolutely. Go big
So
or go home.
you're a teenage snowboarder.
Yes, absolutely. Teenage snowboarder. That's my
the
philosophy.
Shaun White foreign policy. That's what political scientists.
I mean, I
years.
agree with Aaron completely. I think that if we're going to say we need to do something about this and we need to maintain our role in the world as the preeminent superpower, then you know what? If we're comfortable with that arrangement, then we need to act like it. If we're not comfortable with it, then we need to get very comfortable with the idea of what the world looks like when we recede from it. It's going to look a little bit like it did when Britain kind of started giving up its empire, except that there's nobody who's really in a position to take our place that we like terribly much. China, perhaps. Well, you're right. Yeah. I should see in the chat, Charles has said that they didn't give it up. The Brits didn't give up the empire, which is true.
You kept Scotland.
At any rate,
congratulations, Charles. Good job.
Well, let me just say, and maybe this is just because
Charles makes a great point again. I want to get this out there.
Do it.
Britain fighting alone for 2 years. So okay, just want to make sure we know all that. But after the war, we kind of took over. There's nobody who's as cool as us to take it over from us. I think that's the easiest way to say it.
Well, okay, so let me close out on this for real this time, and maybe I've been just watching too much Sons of Anarchy. I admit I've been actually binge watching the entire series to catch up on culture real quick, but I feel like our nation is like living season 5 and 6 of Sons of Anarchy, and we're trying to get out of being the world's police, and everything's crumbling in the chaos that we leave. But that chaos is far away. We also have chaos here at home that we need to discuss here in our last segment tonight, and that is what's going on in Baltimore. Basically, from the headlines that are out there, we have the most violent, the deadliest month since 1999 in Baltimore. We have riots that are going to estimated cost of $20 million to the city. What is this going to do to Baltimore? I mean, it's not as if Baltimore was a thriving economic bastion to begin with, or Maryland for that point, but what is this going to do to an already hard-struck Baltimore? Let me first go to Jeff with this, just because I feel like it.
Well, Baltimore is screwed, but then again, Baltimore has been screwed for the last 40 years. Here's the issue with the indictments. I am very much on the side of people like Leon, who is a police skeptic, which I think is a virtuous thing to be, especially in the conservative movement, because there are, frankly, too few of us. But I also question the objectivity of the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, who is the person who indicted these 6 Baltimore police officers. And I remember we talked about this when Mo Lane was the guest on the show. Mo's from the area, so am I. believe me, the Baltimore Police Department is as corrupt as it gets. I have no doubts that they are capable of almost anything. That said, when you have an obvious conflict of interest like this, a change of venue is called for. I don't really know if the riots or the current civil unrest that's going on there is going to affect things in the city any worse than they already have been. But what I do know is that even though I think there was a real miscarriage of justice here, I still think that you can go too far in the opposite direction and politicize justice. And I do not like seeing somebody who is fairly clearly declared herself as a partisan in this matter trying to prosecute the issue. That makes me very uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, the fact that we've had okay, so the partisanship of the issue is actually one of the biggest frustrations I have, and the automatic call of racism, and when we have actually a diverse crowd who got indicted for what happened there in Baltimore, and we have a city that's been largely controlled by Democrats and specifically black Democrats, you know, how is it that the media gets away with propagating these lies about race so far that we now have riots in a city where an action was taken by people of many colors, not just whites? How's that even happen? Charles, I'm going to go to you.
Well,
Because
rather than answering your question, I thought I would say what I want to say.
That works for me because my question was horrible.
Well, something that's really interested me with the Baltimore riots has been that the way in which the media has reacted to sort of both sides of the political aisle has been odd, in that conservatives really didn't want to talk about race. What they wanted to talk about was politics. The immediate reaction was, this is the Democrats' fault, this is progressivism's fault. Look at when Baltimore last had a Republican mayor, I think it was 1963, and you saw a proliferation of pieces making that case. What the left wanted to talk about was race. This was the product of white supremacy, this was a product of policing, and I don't doubt that there was a real ill done here and that the Baltimore Police Department is corrupt and incompetent. But this was a problem of some larger national issue, possibly the legacy of segregation and slavery. And yet the moment that there was this Sons of Anarchy, as you might put it, fight, we were told that the media hadn't acknowledged race there, but had been keen to talk about it in Baltimore. Well, not really. I mean, the people who were keen to talk about it in Baltimore were the people who always talk about it. And so I'm with Jeff. I think that it's possible to separate out the initial crime, the initial spark, from much of the subsequent behavior. And unfortunately, Baltimore seems to be now stuck in something of an ugly cycle. And you're seeing more and more shootings. Well, of course, we're told that's the lack of gun control. That's not true. You're seeing rioting where people are torching their own infrastructure, and maybe they have a point, but that's not going to help them in the long run. I don't see a great connection between these two things, but unfortunately, they're all rolled into one.
Well, let me ask you, how much of the recent stress that we've seen in these different incidents, ranging from Ferguson to New York to now this Baltimore incident, how much of it has to do with the propagation of false narratives that have been put forth by the media?
Well, it's a difficult one because it's not really surprising that the Baltimore Police Department is incompetent and corrupt when everyone in the Baltimore authorities seems to be incompetent and corrupt. And, you know, as in Ferguson, there are some serious problems here. And I imagine if you were black and you were aware of the indignities that you've suffered or your family has suffered throughout the last few centuries, then you might be liable to kick off. Unfortunately, we seem incapable of telling that story. It has to be part of some latent, you know, holistic national American problem in which the biggest threat to young black men is cops, and it's simply not true. And I do think that, although I don't really blame the Barack Obama or Eric Holder or DeRay, whatever his name is, for the shooting of police officers, I do think it's a little bit unreasonable when we extrapolate out from what are real problems and accuse everybody who's ever put on a uniform, and that's where we seem to be. So is this much rioting justified? No, it's not, in my view.
Yeah, well, I'm a stickler on rioting. I'm one of these people who thinks that rioting is very, very rarely justified. In fact, I think
Unless the Lakers win. If the Lakers win, it's justified. We need to riot about sports again, people. Like, burn a couch because it's fun, not because you're angry.
Exactly. We need to riot over important stuff like the NBA Finals rather than race.
It's like Augustine's just war theory. You know, you have to do everything out of love in your heart, including violence. And an Augustinian approach to rioting is what we need in America right now. That's what we can all harmonize about. What I'm saying is we shouldn't have talked about Baltimore. We should move on to something else.
Bill, you always bring out the best in people. I just got to say that about you. You always look for the best in people, and I love that about you, even when you're drunk. Now, Jeff, I do want to come to you again here. You live in Chicago, or you've lived in Chicago. It's a relatively violent place if you look at the murder statistics and count those things as any value. But what do you think about this? Where do you think the blame lies? Do you think there's a certain proportion of this that definitively can be laid at the hands of the politicians and those in the media who have propagated these false narratives about every black man is being hunted by white cops? Do you think that you can actually divide that up and realistically do that?
Okay, every weekend ends, and then every Monday morning I tweet from one of the local Chicago beat writers who I follow, Peter Nikias. He's a really good guy. He's a stringer for the Tribune. Who talks about like the horrifying weekend murder and or wounding casualty numbers. Like this last Memorial Day weekend, 14 people were killed, and a solid 14 people were killed and 14 others were wounded just this weekend. That's amazing. And that's an urban problem. That's not a political problem. That's a problem with the ghettos and with the population, and bad policing is an issue. But you can't simply just write this off as being a police problem. It is far deeper than that. And I'm going to have to mute this for a second because I got some food to pick up here.
And Neal, let me go to you on this. What about you? How do you think you can? Is it possible once again to divide up the blame here between the politicians, the media, and the actual racist institutional racism that is in some police departments? How do you think that division goes, honestly?
How do I think it should be apportioned?
Yeah.
God.
I mean, is it even something you can really apportion in that manner?
No, it's certainly, especially if we're talking about going back in history and trying to relitigate things that have already happened. All we can really try to do is apply a fair standard going forward. And it's so far as the evidence allows, we can prosecute historical cases and evaluate them as such. But apportioning the blame, I mean, that's a sure way to keep the issue going for another 1,000 years, give or take the rest of humanity. The rest of time, I should say. So, no, I don't think you can. I don't think you can do it, and I don't think we will do it. I don't think we're in a position in this country to have a conversation that would allow us to do it. So there's no hope, and we're doomed. Is where I want to leave it tonight.
I appreciate your optimism for the nation. Let me go ahead and we're going to go ahead and close this segment out. I want to hit one last thing before we move on to our lightning round. Scott wasn't available to be with us last week, and we talked about TPP and TPA and the trade deal and how that all, the fast track authority and all of that. But I'd be remiss if I didn't give Scott a chance to opine on that subject since he wasn't here last week. So, Scott, why don't you go ahead and give us your best pitch?
Well, I'll make it very brief. That I've been really stunned by the conspiracy theories that float around about the boring subject of trade agreements and trade promotion authority. I expect that type of stuff from the tinfoil hat left. I don't really expect it so much from people I interact with on Twitter and read about or read in the on the internet. It's kind of sad. So I'll put it this way. Best thing you can do is when you hear something that sounds like a big conspiracy, don't listen to it, and consult your local think tanks. There's not a single one out there, be it Heritage or Cato or AEI or Brookings or wherever, that thinks these things are secret, backdoor, fifth column, Illuminati, the rest of that. It's all just a bunch of nonsense. There are legitimate issues with free trade agreements. There always have been. For the most part, it's really not that big a deal. But we need something to argue about, I guess. There's no issue literally on the face of the planet on which more economists and wonks agree than FTAs and trade agreements and their value. It's kind of hilarious to now see it become this crazy, dark policy that's going to ruin America and the world.
Let me.
Hey guys, we're already going to outsource your jobs. We might as well outsource your thinking to your local think tank too. That'll surely win over the blue collar class, Scott.
Well, anybody wearing this jacket is not talking to the blue collar class.
Does not have your best.
Charles, you had a point. Charles, you had a point.
I was just going to say that, with this many...
We'll wrap it up right now, man. Okay.
With this many people starving, do we need that many think tanks? I mean, you mentioned Cato and Heritage, both putting a little different gloss on the same...
It's really true.
You are directly responsible for the death of children. You monster.
Well, working at Cato, I'm used to that allegation, and I wear it as a badge of honor, obviously.
On that note, well, let me actually just say this. I want to ask everybody real quick, what is the reason why we have to move this forward now? I actually heard Governor Rick Perry say that he's a big fan of the TPP-TPA, but he doesn't. If it means we can't move forward right now because people don't trust Obama, it makes no difference. We can do it, after we have a Republican president here in a couple, year and a half. So why is it that we must do this now, Scott?
Well, there's the urgency is that we should have done it 3 years ago. The reality is that the United States, in terms of trade liberalization, the United States, who was, by the way, not only the leader of global trade liberalization, but the genesis of global trade liberalization, which began back with Cordell Hull in around World War II. The reality is that we have fallen far, far behind when it comes to that. And so that alone is a reason to get it done. Beyond that, I will say that it's difficult to get the political stars to align. And for a few minutes, we actually have leadership in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House, all trying to achieve the same damn policy. It's every once in a while those things work out, and really, the longer you wait on these deals, the more likely it is that they just get bagged altogether. That's what happened with the WTO's Doha round. Started forever ago and remains incomplete because our cowardly politicians passed on some of the few opportunities we had to complete them back in around 2007. So the reality is you can't just wait. As much as I like Rick Perry, I think he's dead wrong on this. I think that there is a small window of opportunity here that is not going to last through all of 2016, and let's get it done. And again, given that the fact that these are relatively benign measures, they certainly aren't earth-shattering, but they will do some good, whether it be for exporting interests in the United States and elsewhere, whether it be for global development, or whether it be for import consumers who might save just a few bucks on a stick of butter or what else. It just needs to get done. If you can lower taxes on American consumers, it's always a good thing, regardless of who's in charge when it happens.
Thank you, Scott, for giving us all that on the trade agreements. And let me go ahead and say appreciate everybody coming out. We've reached the end of our show. We're going to do a quick lightning round. And, we've had a couple of things suggested in the chat room that we have on what the lightning round should be. I'm actually going to surprise everybody and just throw this out there. And we're going to do this real quick. I'm going to go in an order. And Bill, you're going to be up first, and what I want you to tell me is if Bernie Sanders was a porn star, what would be his porn name? Go.
Matt Harvey. Except less
Charles.
attractive.
Charles, go.
What would be his porn name? His porn name would be Underarm Subsidy.
Nice.
I want to change my answer to Chelsea Clinton.
Oh, God. Jeff, go ahead.
His name would be Dennis Hastert, likely child molester.
Oh, ouch. Neal doing, can you follow that up, or would you even want to?
No, I can do a little thing. Bernie Sensation.
Bernie.
Nice. That's good. That's
Scott,
really good.
Scott.
Personal experience.
I'm going to go with his name would be Jack Marks, but Marks with an X.
Nice. I'm just going to go with a rather plain Farmer Sanders, because that's what I get from him. I think he's a sheep farmer. That's what I think. So we're going to go ahead and close out the show now. We didn't get a chance to get around to the breaking news about Dennis Hastert being indicted. Basically, we all know he was more than likely blackmailed for something really disgusting. Maybe that'll be a subject for next week's show. We appreciate y'all coming around, and we hope you enjoyed the show and come back next week.
Dennis Hastert is a kid toucher.